The US is the biggest oil producer in the world, making more oil than the second and third place oil producers combined. So why are gas prices going up more than other places in the world? More complicated than you would think, but actually very simple to understand. So back during the Obama era, the oil and gas industry, mainly in the Permian Basin in Texas and the Bakken Formation in the Dakotas, exploded. So why did Obama preside over the biggest oil boom in American history? In 2008, the US produced 5 million barrels of oil a day. By the time that he left office in 2016, the US produced 9 million barrels of oil, an 80% increase. This made the US energy independent. Why are US gas prices still going up? In 2024, the US produced more energy than it consumed and exported the difference. By every single measure, America is flush with energy. The problem is that not all oil is made equal, and stick with me here. The oil that is dug out of the ground in the Bakken Formation and in the Permian Basin is light, sweet crude, the stuff that is used in jet fuel and gasoline. Heavy crude is more difficult to refine, but there are a lot more commercial applications for heavy crude. For example, plastics, asphalt, waxes, lube, grease, and importantly, diesel. Notice I didn't mention gasoline in the list. It is more efficient to use sweet, light crude. The US has enough gas for itself, right? The US produces so much oil, it's almost busting out of the US's skin, but the refineries aren't set up for it. This is one of the problems behind why gas prices in America can't stay low. The problem is that companies can't just flip a switch, heavy crude to light crude. The US refinery oil infrastructure has, for the 40 years prior to Obama's shale boom, imported heavy crude. It cost billions for a refinery to be ready to process light crude. So it makes more sense for the companies to import a lot of heavy crude from Mexico, the sands of Canada, and sometimes Venezuela, well, when we're not invading it, while exporting almost all the sweet light crude to other countries who already have more light crude refining capacity. Keep the oil at home, lower prices for all Americans. We are energy independent. Shouldn't we just do that? Think of the global energy market as a village. And in this village, every single person produces 100 apples a year and sells each apple for $1 to each other. Now imagine a shock happens and half of the apple supply disappears because they suddenly got the Strait of Hormuz disease or something, and half of them are inedible. Suddenly, your 100 apples, which you could have used to feed your family, are better spent selling it to someone who has no apples because they will pay an exorbitant price, maybe $50, so they don't starve. This causes your own supply of apples to diminish and you to sell your apples to make some money while prices are high. Even if citizens wanted to sell it for less than 50 to stop people from starving, you cannot. If you sell it at 40, what the other people in the village will do is they will buy it at 40 and sell it at 50 to the other people that need it. You get my point. Until you find a substitute for apples like pears, which requires the long process of researching the tree planting, spending money on pear infrastructure, it's still $50 an apple. This oil shock is not as devastating as the 1970s oil shock because companies and countries have invested in pear-shaped industries, meaning the world and the US are less dependent on cheap oil for energy as they once were, and this shock will probably in the long run lead to less energy independence on oil, but in the short term, it sucks. The entire energy market is global. This is the predicament that oil companies are currently in. There is not much that they can do to actually lower the price of gas in the US. If they tried to sell it for less than market price to consumers, Saudi Aramco or another oil firm would just swoop in to buy the gas or oil and sell it back to Americans at the same price as it was before. The US doesn't have the capacity to refine all the light crude it produces. Companies are actively investing billions to retool refineries from heavy to light crude, a process that takes an enormous amount of time. But for now, the surplus crude gets exported to Asia and South America, where the infrastructure for light crude refinement already exists, and where they can find marginally more expensive markets where they can offload their oil. And so companies are deciding again, much like the last oil shock, to invest in alternative sources of energy, in alternative platforms that don't need oil, so that when the next oil shock happens, they aren't left with a massive bill and having to tell their shareholders they posted a giant loss for this quarter. The biggest takeaway is that more energy is better, regardless of what type of energy it is, and that the perceived greed of oil companies is actually the market doing what it was designed to do and allowing excess profits to be made in the short term, which incentivizes more competitors into the market, making energy cheaper and more diverse in the long term. This was a slightly different video, but let me know how you liked it. I liked making it. If you couldn't tell, I love charts, economics, and geography, so this was very fun to do, regardless of the 30 hours that it took to create. Subscribe so that I can pass United Healthcare, a company with the market cap of Portugal.